We are a military political organization, and some colleagues asked me to elaborate on the situation in the zone, specifically in Ukraine, within the framework of the special military operation in light of recent events.
Today is November 28th, 2024, and Vladimir Putin just gave this speech. You'll see edits throughout the speech in order to cut down the silence between the translator and Putin himself. It's very important to listen to Putin when he speaks, because what he says, he means and he will do, much like Donald Trump. Joe Biden is trying to push the United States and Europe into World War III before Donald Trump takes office.
I have always done this at our meetings, understanding the significance of current events, and I will gladly do so today. I consider it my duty to inform you about the events that have occurred in recent years. As you know, officials of Western countries stated in early November that the Ukrainian armed forces were authorized to strike Russian territory with long-range, high-precision Western-made weapons. We have repeatedly pointed out that this would mean the direct involvement of these countries in the armed conflict, since the use of such weapons is impossible without the direct participation of military personnel and specialists from relevant NATO countries. Nonetheless, as you are aware, despite our warnings about the danger of escalating the conflict, strikes were carried out on our territory in the Kursk and Bryansk regions with American missile attacks and British Storm Shadow missiles. The consequences of these attacks and the damage caused to us were addressed in my statement on November 21st. For reference, as some colleagues also requested, the Russian equivalent of all three ATACMS modifications is the Iskander missile system and its various modifications. The warhead mass in TNT equivalent is approximately the same, but the Iskander has a greater range. The new American missile GLSDB, by its parameters, does not surpass Russian equivalents. The Storm Shadow air-launched missile, the French Scalp, and the German Taurus have warheads weighing 450-480 kilograms in TNT equivalent, with a range of 500-650 kilometers. 650 kilometers is the range of the German Taurus missile. The Russian counterpart to these systems is the KH-101 air-launched missile. It has a comparable warhead power, but significantly exceeds each European-made system in range. As I mentioned earlier, the new American missile GLSDB and the JASM are inferior to Russian equivalents in their characteristics. We, of course, know how many corresponding weapon systems are in the arsenal of a potential adversary, how many are stored, where exactly they are located, how many have been supplied to Ukraine, and how many are planned to be delivered. Regarding the production of missile systems and related equipment, Russia's production volume is 10 times that of all NATO countries combined. Next year, production will increase by another 25–30%. We see that the leader of the Kyiv regime is begging his patrons for other military equipment. But no one should forget about our caliber complexes, hypersonic missile systems like the Kinzhal and Zircon, which, in terms of their characteristics, have no analogs in the world. Their production is also ramping up and proceeding at full speed. In our range of products in this class, if I may put it that way, other new items may appear in the near future. As the saying goes, the client will undoubtedly be satisfied. By the way, these weapon systems were used over the past 2 days in response to continued missile strikes on Russian territory. A total of 100 systems, 100 missiles of various classes that I just mentioned, and 466 strike drones were deployed. Last night, we conducted a complex strike using 90 missiles of similar classes and 100 drones. 17 targets were hit, including military facilities, defense industry objects, and their support systems. Once again, I emphasize that these strikes on our part were in response to ongoing missile strikes on Russian territory using American ATACMS missiles. As I have repeatedly stated, there will always be a response from our side. Finally, the newest hypersonic strike system, Oreshnik, in a non-nuclear configuration, had to be tested in combat conditions, as I mentioned earlier, in response to Western-made long-range missile strikes on Bryansk and Kursk regions. The Oreshnik has no analogs in the world, and I doubt similar systems will appear anytime soon. Let me remind you once again how the Oreshnik works, as you requested. Tens of self-guiding warheads attack the target at a speed of 10 Machs, approximately 3 kilometers per second. The temperature of the striking elements reaches 4,000 degrees. To compare, the surface temperature of the Sun is 5,506,000 degrees. Everything in the epicenter of the explosion is reduced to elementary particles. The missile can strike even heavily protected and deeply buried objects. According to military and technical experts, in the case of a massive cluster deployment of these missiles, the power of the strike would be comparable to that of nuclear weapons. However, the Oreshnik is not a weapon of mass destruction. First, this was confirmed during the November 21st tests. It is a high-precision weapon. Second, and most importantly, there is no nuclear charge, meaning no nuclear contamination after its use. Today, we have several such items ready for use. Of course, in response to continued strikes on Russian territory with long-range Western-made missiles, we will respond, including the potential continued testing of the Oreshnik in combat conditions, as was done on November 21st. At present, the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff of the Russian Army are selecting targets for strikes on Ukrainian territory. These could include military facilities, defense industry enterprises, or decision-making centers in Kyiv, especially since the Kyiv regime has repeatedly tried to strike at state-critical facilities in Russia, in St. Petersburg and Moscow. These attempts continue. Serial production of the Oreshnik has begun, but the choice of weaponry will ultimately depend on the nature of the selected targets and the threats posed to the Russian Federation. Dear colleagues, everything I have just said is undoubtedly significant. But the most important thing is that even with the most advanced weapons, the outcome of any military conflict or campaign, including a special military operation, is decided on the ground, on the battlefield. Ultimately, everything depends on the soldier. Of course, for victory, equipment, ammunition, and military conflict are necessary. But the most critical factor is motivation, the internal readiness of a person to fight and, if necessary, to sacrifice themselves for their homeland. For what, for example, should forcibly mobilized Ukrainian servicemen and officers give their lives today? For the Bandera neo-Nazi regime entrenched in Kyiv, for its leaders who have already lost their legitimacy. After all, they didn't even stand for elections. Today, they are entirely illegitimate, and from a legal standpoint, they don't even have the right to issue orders to the armed forces. Moreover, those who execute such orders also become accomplices to serious crimes of this nature. They have no right to send people to their deaths or drive them to slaughter. As I said earlier, such orders are criminal. Our fighters, on the other hand, fully understand what they are fighting for, what they are shedding blood for. They see that it has fallen to their lot, as has happened repeatedly in our history, to stand in the way of forces that have once again decided to destroy Russia, to deliver what they call today a strategic defeat. That is why our fighters are fighting for the future of Russia and their children. No deliveries of even the most advanced weapons to Ukrainian territory will change the situation on the battlefield. We have faced various adversaries in our history. Some may cross themselves, others may call upon Allah for help, but all together they will move forward, and nothing will stop them.
Please like and subscribe if you want to see more interviews and speeches.